How's it going, folks? Craig Judelman here again, or maybe for the first time. Gonna talk a little bit about technique. I know it's a sort of a taboo in old time music to talk about technique. Sometimes it feels because there are so many ways of holding and playing the fiddle, and they all work to some extent, but some work better than others. And there's some general principles that can help you to play in tune and be relaxed, so you can not wear yourself out and get a nice tone. So we're gonna start with the bit on the left hand and holding the fiddle, and then there will be more on the right hand and all those sorts of things. But so just a quick little bit here. First of all, where do you put the fiddle? You see people holding it in a lot of different places, and they all work for different people. Here's an example. So as you can see, I can play this tune in a lot of different places, and I get a bit of a different sound and a different feeling in my body actually when I do each one, and I do use all of those different positions at different times. I kind of tend to recommend, if you're not really sure where to begin and you don't care that much, to start up here, because I think it is a little easier to get the fingers in tune and to understand the mechanics of everything, which can mean either with your chin on the chin rest or just resting the fiddle on your shoulder somewhere. But if that doesn't feel comfortable to you, or you just like the way it looks down here, then do that. The main thing for me is that wherever I hold the fiddle, I want my fingers to be able to bend nicely, and have kind of what I think is like a tabletop across the top here. So there's like a flat surface more or less. The fingers are relatively close to the fingerboard, ready to play, and kind of in their position where they'll be playing. The other main principle I have is that the thumb should be bent. You'll notice if you bend your thumb this way and keep your pinky straight and try to move your wrist, it's kind of difficult. You'll feel some resistance and tightness. But if you bend everything this way, like bend facing in, it becomes a lot easier. It's like if you are doing a somersault or a flip and you tuck your body in to get the center of gravity more in the center. So I find that really helps me wherever I'm holding it. I see people playing like this, and of course you can do it. You'll see a lot of great old fiddlers that have all sorts of positions and they make it work. But it creates more tightness in your hand, which makes you more tired, and it makes it harder to really keep your fingers spread and play in tune and have control. And if you are doing any kind of shifting or vibrato at any point, which we don't do a ton of in old time music, but that definitely can happen, then that'll be a lot more difficult with your thumb like this than like that. So when the fiddle's up here, it's a bit more straightforward. I tend to think about the fiddle resting between the base of my pointer finger and that bend in the thumb. So it sits there, it's not actually on the bottom, there's a bit of space there. And I don't squeeze it at all, actually. I just sort of let my hand be there, and the fiddle is like a piece of wood that you're putting on top of two posts. And it'll just stay right there. That's all you actually need. One of the biggest things we fight against as fiddlers is clenching down with our chin and our neck and tensing our jaw and lifting our shoulder. And once you're doing all that, this whole area is all tensed up, and that translates into tension in your arm, and everything gets a lot more difficult. So even though you might be playing a really simple tune, if you can keep that stuff a bit more relaxed, you'll find that it just feels better, and you'll sound more in tune, and you can get better pressure on the strings. The pressure on the strings is actually really important. And you don't necessarily always want the most pressure, but that will give you a really clean sound. If you're playing in a loud situation or you're playing for a dancing, you need the notes to really stick out. You really want to have a clean attack, kind of a lot of velocity coming down on your hand, on your fingers, so you really stop the note. If you're playing something a bit more bluesy, then you might want to actually have less pressure and do a bit more kind of sliding into the note and half pushing down, which will give you a softer tone. I'll see if I can show you what I mean here. So here's full pressure. Now here's the same thing with less pressure. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. They both sound good and both have their right place. And ideally you can do them both. So this is how I hold the fiddle generally when I'm in my more classical position, right? The more traditional classic violin school thing. And then I'm really trying to keep my wrist straight, and I'm just gently pulling the base of my pinky a little bit towards the fingerboard so that everything is kind of centered over the fingerboard and ready to go. Often you see sort of like people playing like this and then reaching over to get the pinky and then coming back. And that just creates an extra motion that'll get in the way of you playing as fast as you want to. Another thing that you see people do is they think they're reaching for the pinky and they're actually pulling their wrist back here. And so it's like this, and then it straightens out your finger, you get further away from where you're going, and it's counterproductive, and you lose tone and accuracy. So you can practice really trying to keep the base of the pinky joint near the fiddle as you're playing it, and not letting the position really change as you're playing your fourth finger. Of course, some people have really short fingers and have to do strange things to get where they want to be, which is okay. That's, everybody deals with the hand they're given, but we have some ideas of what we want to do. The one other thing that I tend to do that not a lot of fiddlers, especially old-time fiddlers, do is most people have their thumb either right at the back of the fiddle, just like this, kind of resting there, or centered with their first finger, which can be a nice way to sort of establish your position and know where that first finger goes, and then everything is relative to that. But especially if you have shorter fingers, or you feel like you have less power and control with the third and fourth fingers, your ring finger and pinky, it can be really helpful to move your thumb up a little bit, kind of like where a low second finger would be, which just makes the hand a bit more round, so everything is, again, just kind of really leaning over the string and ready to go, and takes out some tension here, and it puts your weight a little bit more on these two fingers, which are actually the weaker ones. The middle two fingers share a tendon, so they're not quite as strong, and this one is obviously just a bit smaller, and we use it less, so it needs a little extra help generally. You'll find a lot of people have trouble with their third and fourth fingers being a little bit flat, but most people pretty quickly get the first finger in tune. So rather than establishing your position based on the first finger, which is actually the easier one, and then reaching up for these fingers, if you kind of think of it based more on the third finger with the thumb a bit higher, and maybe you have to pull back just a little bit for the first finger, that can help a lot with some intonation issues. And you may notice that while I certainly have learned this classical position and had it drilled into me for many years, I do often collapse my wrist and play like this, or play like this, which is not, officially great technique, but if it doesn't hurt your playing, and it feels comfortable, then that's really fine, in my opinion. And of course, maybe the majority of old-time fiddlers play in some version of this position. When I do this, I still try to keep my thumb bent in some way and not let it just come flat back or sit up like this. And so that might mean kind of turning it sideways and letting it just sit somewhere there, or it might be here or somewhere there. But usually I try to sort of still keep it closer between the first and second fingers and bent. Something like that. I do like this position here a lot. So this would be maybe the fourth possibility of all of my general sort of options. There's up here under the chin with the chin resting. There's maybe without the chin resting, which I find if you're into this classical type position, but you also sing sometimes, especially if you sing when you're playing, then just lifting your head up can help you to be able to relax everything in your neck and get a good singing tone. And even if you don't do that, it's a great exercise to just sometimes lift off and see if you have tension in here, or in the middle of a session, just take a break a little bit and let your neck go to some other positions. Then there's a little bit more down on the shoulder, pretty similar, but just even further away from your chin, and you definitely have no chance to rest your chin on it. Also works great. The next option is to tuck it into your armpit, which what I do here is it's like really wedged in to my armpit. I don't recommend smelling your fiddle after you do that, but it still might sound good. And there's something nice about this. You can really see what's happening. You also hear the fiddle a little bit differently. It's slightly further away, but you're hearing the sound kind of come out of the F holes in the whole top plate. Once you start getting down this low, you might have to turn the fiddle actually a little bit to really get all the strings, which some people do. That works. I like this. I definitely, then my wrist is fully supporting the fiddle here, but I'm still trying to keep the thumb a bit bent. And the fingers, usually then it means I end up supporting the fiddle a bit with my first finger, which I don't love because it means that finger is engaged in something else that's preventing it from moving freely and being loose and in tune. But if you have long enough fingers that you can still get a good pressure on the string, then it can work just fine. Obviously you can't do a ton of shifting down here, but you can go up to second or third position a little bit just by kind of moving your wrist a bit, you know. It kind of works. And then you see some people holding it even lower, just like really against their side, which again, most of these lower positions, you kind of have to have long enough arms that you can really get over there to make it work. But it still works, and especially if you are a classical player, I do encourage you to try some of these other positions, because I think there's something about just getting out of that classical technique that will help you to find a different feeling when you're fiddling, which can be really important for finding a sound that feels, authentic, or authentic to you at least. And just, it should be a different feeling in your body, I think, when you're playing fiddle music than if you're playing a Beethoven sonata or something. And sometimes just changing the physicality of what you're doing can actually help you find a different sensibility in the music. You will notice as you get down here, you don't have as much bow to work with because your leg is there. But, generally we don't need full big bows for most old time music. Definitely some long bows, but the whole bow, probably not. I will, if I'm playing a waltz, I'm not so likely to play it down there unless I want it to be really kind of rough and rowdy, just because I think you do get a bit nicer tone, a bit more control, and a bit more bow to work with here. So for a slow tune or a waltz, then I really try to take advantage of all the options you have. So there's a couple options for how you might hold the fiddle, and some ideas to help you find something that works for you. Remember to try to really keep that thumb bent if you can, or at least experiment with it if you're not already bending it out, and see if that makes a difference for you in your hand. And I recommend just trying a couple different things and seeing what works, seeing how it affects your bowing and the sound. Maybe record it and see also if you notice something different in your playing. If you're a classical fiddler, I would definitely say try some of those other things down here, and if you're a self-taught person who's never tried this, then give it a try. And whatever you're doing, just really pay a lot of attention to these muscles in your back and shoulder, and really try to keep them relaxed. Feel rooted in the ground and level through your body, because any of that tension will translate into your fingers and make it a lot harder to play and to play for a long time. So I hope you enjoy that, and if you like this technique stuff, there's a few more videos here about other tips for getting a good sound and feeling good while you do it.